Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
Last week we talked about Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, which states no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. Basically, we talked about direct tax, indirect tax, excise tax, which is an indirect tax, income tax, and duty tax. Duty tax is an excise tax, which is an indirect tax. So we talked quite a bit about that, and you can find that on messianiclamradio.com/Constitution, or just look it up with all the other shows. This follows through as we go into Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5, which states, no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. That's it. That's the full thing right there. One of our smaller ones, but even the smaller ones have an enormous packed amount within it. This clause, as with all the other clauses in Section 9, makes Congress set limits on how taxes can be levied, prevents taxes from being levied on trade between states, and this clause also shows how Congress must pass tax legislation to spend the public money, and that they must show how they have spent the money. Interesting on that. It just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And of course, anybody that has lived anywhere where they have to pay taxes knows what a tax is, but I like to give definitions. It helps people clarify things. It helps me clarify things as I progress in a study or research. Definitions are vital to understanding exactly how any research can progress. So the definition of tax is a compulsory contribution to state revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits, or added to the cost of some goods, services, and transactions. So what we just described there in that definition is the same as what I just said, direct taxes and indirect taxes. Surely all our tax laws and extensive procedures concerning those laws are documented somewhere, right? Well, of course they are. Enter the Internal Revenue Code. Organized topically into subtitles and sections covering income tax in the United States. Now we can break that down. Income tax. Of course, we know there's an income tax, and it's based on who we are and what we've done through any specific year, as far as whether or not things can be taxed or not, how much you made while you're working, how much you spent on individual items, so on and so forth. But there it covers income tax. It covers this code. The Internal Revenue Code is organized so that it tells the government the different procedures, including payroll taxes, estate taxes, gift taxes, and excise tax, as well as procedure and administration. The IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, is the domestic portion of federal statutory tax law in the United States, and its implementing agency is, everybody, the Internal Revenue Service. Yes, it is. We all know of the Internal Revenue Service. So clause 5 says that no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. Now, we covered this on last week's clause 4, but to give you an kind of re-update here to let you understand what a duty definition is. A duty is a kind of tax levied by a state. It is often associated with customs, also known as tariffs or dues. A tariff is a tax imposed by a government on imports or exports of goods. Besides being a source of revenue for the government, import duties can also be a form of regulation of foreign trade and policy that taxes foreign products to encourage or safeguard domestic industry. Tariffs are among the most widely used instruments of protectionism, along with import and export quotas. A duty is often used to describe a tax on certain items purchased abroad. A duty differs from a tax because of its specific commodities, financial transactions, and estates, rather than on individuals. A duty is an excise tax or indirect tax. We kind of defined that earlier, which is taxes paid when purchases are made on a specific good, such as gasoline, or goods, such as a grocery sack full of food. All of us know that when we get that receipt, and as Sherry pointed out last week, even your phone bill, if you get that receipt, is just full of different taxes that are applied. But for instance, when you go to the grocery store, and everybody's been to a grocery store, convenience store, and you buy several different items, and the receipt is there. Matter of fact, I'm sure I've got one laying out right here. It's just you just literally have a receipt, and at the bottom it always says and it, like this one says 7% tax. We'll even tell you how much of your total amount they took out for tax. That is an excise tax or an indirect tax. When you do your taxes for the federal government and your state government at the end of the year, that is a direct tax. It is directly affecting you and taken from you. Excise taxes are often included in the price of the product, as we just talked about there. Export signifies goods exported to a foreign country. If you don't know what the word export means, I actually hadn't put it up there. It means that an import would be to bring something in. Export means you're taking it out. So if you have goods and you're selling those goods, when you have them go out of the place that you're going to sell, they are exported. And it signifies goods exported to a foreign country, not to an unincorporated territory of the United States. During the history of working out details concerning this clause of the Constitution, the harbor maintenance tax came into effect, called the HMT, and the HMT is directly levied on importers and domestic shippers using coastal or inland ports. The wording itself gives the definition of this: harbor maintenance. Pretty much self-explanatory there. Typically passed on to U.S. taxpayers on the purchase of imported goods or services. The court held unconstitutional the harbor maintenance tax, the HMT, under the export clause. insofar as the tax was applied to goods loaded at United States ports for export. Remember, our whole thing here is no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. So the courts held this to be unconstitutional, though it was in effect. The HMT required shippers to pay a uniform charge on commercial cargo shipped through the nation's ports. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5 said the court, in other words, when it was brought to court, this section, which we're talking about today, categorically bars Congress from imposing any tax on exports. However, the clause does not prohibit or forbid a user fee, a charge that lacks the attributes for a tax or duty and is designed to compensate for government-supplied services, facilities, or benefits. HMT was titled as a tax, described as a tax in the law, and codified in the Internal Revenue Code. Aside from labels, however, courts must look at how things operate, and the HMT did not qualify as a user fee. It did not represent compensation for services rendered. The value of export cargo did not correspond reliably with the federal harbor services used or usable by the exporter. Thus, we have a stamp duty tax. It just builds upon builds upon builds upon. Stamp duty tax is a tax that is levied on single property purchases or documents. A physical stamp or a revenue stamp, as it's usually called, had to be attached to or impressed upon the document to denote that stamp duty had been paid before the document was legally effective. More modern versions of the tax no longer require an actual stamp. It's just an understood and written into the document. Also imposed on foreign bills of lading, charter policy parties, or marine insurance policies. A tax or duty upon exports, and so void, but an act requiring the stamping of all packages, for instance, tobacco, and most other items that are exported, that are intended for export, in order to prevent fraud, was held not to be forbidden as a tax on exports. So as time progressed and different things were implemented, different taxes were implemented, they would be brought to the courts. That's why we have the Constitution. They are brought, they're in a way to bring the money in, but yet you have to keep them right and righteous and right for our rights and for the rights of the people of the parties.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.